Now, having done with the most significant varieties of myositis, we know that we have these patients who are just suffering from polymyalgias. On the other hand, we can have patients who are suffering from polymyalgias exhibiting some cutaneous features as well. Now, on the other hand, we have these patients who are suffering from inclusion body myositis. Now, what is the particular definition of these patients who are suffering from inclusion body myositis? It's basically a progressive muscular disorder, and it is characterized by, again, there is an underlying inflammatory process that is going on, and it is again resulting in the weakness and the atrophy of the muscles. So this is again the particular features that we usually observe in patients of inclusion body myositis. Now, again, a lot of researches have been carried out, and the particular age group that is usually affected by this inclusion body myositis is the age group that is almost lying between 50 to 70 years. So these are the patients, or these are the people, this is the age group that is more prone to the development of this inclusion body myositis. Obviously, the diagnosis would lie upon the lab investigations that are being carried out, the invasive and the non-invasive techniques. That is going to clarify the picture much more. And we are also going to look at the overall history of the individual as well. The underlying conditions of the individual are also evaluated for, and you look for the triggering factors that is basically resulting in the development of inclusion body myositis or IBM in the individual. So looking at the patient of inclusion body myositis, what are you expecting to look for? It can be the involvement of the wrists and the fingers. So usually the muscles that are affected are the skeletal muscles, and accordingly the sign and symptoms or the clinical pictures basically would develop accordingly. It's going to be the wrists and specifically the fingers, the upper limb, or even it can be the involvement of the lower limb as well. There is going to be it's going to be a painful condition for the patient, and the movements are also going to be restricted, and that is basically going to give you an overall picture in case of the inclusion body myositis. Then obviously, moving on, the other set of the skeletal muscles that are affected, mainly we have the muscles at the front of the thigh. So the proximities are going to be affected rather than the distal ends. This is what you have to keep in mind. It's going to be the upper arm, or either it is going to be the front of the thigh that is affected. So usually it is whether it is the pain or whether it is the fatigue or the weakness that the patient is suffering from. The muscles that are affected are the proximal muscles rather than the distal muscles in cases of the IBM. Then the muscles that lift the front of the foot. So the dorsum is going to be affected, and obviously when you basically give commands to lift the front of the foot, the patient who is suffering from an extreme condition of IBM will not be able to perform or will not be able to obey the commands accordingly. A generalized muscle weakness can be one of the presenting complaint as well. And sometimes in the exceptional cases, it can be a painless phenomena, and rather the patient would just complain of a chronic fatigue or a chronic weakness that you observe. It is going to be a symmetrical condition, and when you rule out the other causes, the underlying causes or the conditions that might exhibit as the weakness in the muscles. For instance, we studied the amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, in which again it was a painless condition, and the patient was presenting with the weakness, a generalized weakness, and there are a lot of other conditions which are painless and the patient exhibit weakness. So this can be one of the differentials at your hand. When you have a painless patient who is presenting to you with a generalized weakness or with a chronic fatigue that he's suffering from, you might consider IBM as one of the differentials as well. There is an insidious onset rather than a chronic onset of the disease, and usually the duration of the disease is acute in its nature rather than chronic. Then we have an asymmetrical muscle involvement might be an exceptional case. Usually it is not the case, but in exceptional cases we might consider an asymmetrical involvement as one of the presentations of the IBM. Now, again, when you look at the muscles, there are obviously the fascicles that are lying, and the perivascular or the perivascular inflammation is going to result in the endovascular atrophy. So the certain fascicles are going to be affected when you carry out the muscle biopsy and you look at the damage that has taken place in the particular individual. That is going to exhibit the fact that the particular muscle fibers or the particular muscle bundles are affected in this particular case. So when you look at a cross section, as you can even evaluate over here, I highlight, these are the particular bundles of the muscles that are present, and there is this perivascular inflammation that is quite significantly present over here, and that is suggestive of the underlying inflammatory responses that are taking place and are highly suggestive of an inflammatory condition rather than something which is more of the pathological processes going on in the neuronal damage, or either it can be even a neuronal damage. So basically you rule out that neuronal damage or damage at the level of the spinal cord or damage which is occurring at the level of the higher brain centers, and rather you more over focus on the pathology of the muscles itself that is resulting in the muscular weakness in the individual. So when we have these patients of myositis, we must keep in mind that it's not always a particular myositis that we're dealing in with. It was just for the purpose of theory, and it was just for the purpose of studying that we completely divided myositis into different categories, naming them polymyositis, dermatomyositis, or inclusion body myositis. Usually, we are dealing with cases of overlap myositis in which we have a multiple picture. Even we have atypical pictures, such as people who are suffering not from a symmetrical response, and there is a particular side of body that is affected more in particular individuals. So there can always be exceptions, and we have to keep that even in our mind as well. The overlap myositis can be even a condition in which myositis is usually associated with some other underlying condition, which is giving again the particular features of the joint pains or the polymyalgias in the individual. Myopathies that are associated with the other connective tissue diseases. So usually patients who are suffering from connective tissue diseases have similar signs and symptoms. They suffer from joint pains as well. They suffer from dermatological manifestations. They suffer from polymyalgia. So these typical signs and symptoms are even seen in patients of connective tissue diseases. For instance, we have patients of scleroderma. So the patients of scleroderma have the dermatological manifestations as well as they have the polymyalgias as well. So the diagnosis would even lie upon when you are definitive of the fact that the patient is suffering from scleroderma, and you even find out the signs of polymyositis on histological findings, and when you carry out the muscle biopsies, that is going to be conclusive of the fact that we are dealing in with scleroderma, and alongside the patient has an overlap myositis. So this would be the final diagnosis in that particular case. Then we can have patients of systemic lupus erythematosus. Typically, patients of systemic lupus erythematosus have joint pains. They have a butterfly rash on the cheeks and the nose, and they have that particular ANCA bodies, P ANCAs and S ANCAs on their definitive diagnosis. And once you have diagnosed that this patient is suffering from SLE and he's suffering from an overlap myositis. So this is how you basically going to deal in with when you have these patients at your hand. Then we have mixed connective tissue disorders. Again, there is going to be an overlap picture as well over here in this case, and the sign and symptoms are basically overlapping, and that is why we're using the word of, or we're using the diagnosis of overlap myositis in cases of connective tissue disorders that are associated with patients who are also suffering from myositis on the other hand. So basically, when you have these patients of overlap myositis, we also want to rule out that if there isn't any underlying condition that the patient is suffering from, the patient might be allergic to some particular pharmacological group of drugs. And then we can say that particular patients, for instance, patients might be allergic to statins. So, taking the history in detail, it can be even a long term therapy, and it can be even a therapy that the patient has been introduced to in the recent past. So, you have to take the history in detail, and that is going to be quite helpful in managing or in ruling out that the patient is allergic to some sort of drugs or not. Colchicine is one of the drugs that is used as an anti-malarial, and a lot of patients are have been proved to be allergic to the use of colchicine. So you have to rule out if the patient has been prescribed with this kind of drug or not in the recent past. And then we have patients who are even allergic to hydroxychloroquine. It's again one of the treatment of choice for malaria. It is an anti-malarial treatment. Steroids are sometimes prescribed to the patients, and they do respond to in a sort of an allergic reaction. An inflammatory response is mediated, and again that stressful reaction, and again the cascade of events, the release of the cytokines, and again obviously it is going to result in the necrosis of the muscles and the overall atrophy of the muscles, and the weakness is going to prevail in the particular individual. Now, alcohol, the use or the consumption of alcohol, is even in small amounts, people do get allergic, and they exhibit the signs of allergies, and that is sometimes the case in a lot of patients. Cocaine is a drug of abuse usually, and you have to rule out that the patient is not suffering from any kind of drug abuse or an illegal exploitation of drugs or not. Cocaine is one of the drugs that is quite notorious for the development of dermatomyositis in patients, along with the other cutaneous manifestations, including the cocaine bugs, the creeping or the crawling, the sensation of the crawling of insects. All of these are the dermatological manifestations. And it is even sometimes associated with the development of this kind of a condition of muscle atrophy or the overall weight loss associated with polymyalgias in the individuals. So it's not only the prescribed drugs, it can be an illegal use of the drugs that is resulting in a particular patient and a particular clinical picture in the individual. And you have to rule that out when you're taking the drug history in detail from the patient. Now, once you are suspecting that this particular patient can be suffering from myositis, any sort of myositis, polymyositis or dermatomyositis or inclusion body myositis, overlap myositis, you have to keep a list of differentials on your hand as well. There are always exceptions, and you'd be carrying out all the baselines, regardless of the fact that you're quite sure that the patient is suffering from myositis. So you'd be ruling out the other definitive causes that can result in a similar picture of the myositis. What is the range of differentials at your hand? This is again very important. HIV-induced neurological signs and symptoms are quite similar to this kind of myositis condition. So you'd be ruling out and you'd be carrying out the lab investigations regarding the HIV infections. And this is very important when you are suspecting or making the definitive diagnosis of myositis in cases. ALS is another phenomena that we've already gone through. It's basically a condition which is known as the amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, and it's basically a completely different entity. It is basically a set of signs and symptoms, again exhibiting as muscle weakness, and the clinical picture is quite similar, but the underlying pathology is not inflammatory. It's not always inflammatory in its nature, and it's not affecting the muscles at all. It is the prime pathology which is affecting the spinal cord, and it is giving way to the muscular atrophy as well. But the underlying pathology in cases of ALS is the spinal cord, that is the dorsal horns of the spinal cords that are affected, particularly in cases of ALS, and that is resulting in the muscular atrophy. And finally, the muscular weakness and the myalgias also prevail in cases of ALS. So it's usually a very overlapping picture, and you have to rule out that whether we are dealing with ALS or either we have a case of myositis at our hand. Myasthenia gravis is another condition which is basically the pathology is basically at the neuromuscular junction, and basically the acetylcholine reuptake is inhibited at this level, and this is the underlying pathology in cases of myasthenia gravis. Again, the clinical picture and the clinical presentation is quite different. It starts distally and then moves proximally, and there is a particular history again that is associated. It's an autoimmune disorder, and the underlying pathology is again an autoimmunity. But obviously, the definitive diagnosis and the lab investigations are going to clarify the picture accordingly in cases of myasthenia gravis. Then we have to rule out any other muscular dystrophic conditions over here. We have to rule out the inherited metabolic myopathies, particularly over here. And we have to focus on the fact that it's not the metabolic disturbances that are resulting in the myopathic conditions or resulting in the muscular damage in the individuals. And finally, obviously, giving the overall picture of muscular weakness and the overall fatigue that we're dealing in with. Now, a lot of patients and a lot of cases of amyloid and sarcoid myopathies also have the similar clinical picture. Again, the histology is going to be quite helpful. Amyloidosis is a phenomena that can be histologically proven. So, on muscle biopsies, it can be proved that either we are dealing with with a case of amyloidosis, or either it's a case of sarcoidosis affecting the muscles of that particular patient, or either we are dealing with the myositis in this particular case. So all in all, basically, when you have these patients of myositis, you look into and you basically, first of all, getting a detailed history is very important. You move on with a complete and thorough clinical examination, specifically focusing on the neurological examination, just to rule out the neurological causes, specifically in which the spinal cord is involved, or specifically in which the higher brain centers are involved, and that is resulting in the muscular weakness or the weakness that is seen or that is exhibited as dysphagias or dyspneas or cardiac myopathies in that individual, or either we are dealing with a pathology that is specifically associated with the inflammatory response of the muscles. And then moving on, the labs are again very important, because we have to rule out all the other differentials ranging from the infectious conditions, a lot of autoimmune disorders, a lot of muscular dystrophies themselves, and as well as a lot of spinal cord disorders have this particular set of signs and symptoms that may mimic this condition of myositis as well. So only the lab investigations is going to clarify the picture in details, and we have to focus on the lab results, as well as we have to focus on the symptomatology of the individual and plan out a particular treatment or a management guideline in case of polymyositis or dermatomyositis, or whatever kind of category that we're dealing in with, and then move on with the prognostic factors and the final outcomes in a particular patient.